So, how did you end up meeting George Sandler? And I know you knew Brooks through Living Large, but how did the Sandler connection happen?
So I met a musician that subbed on guitar some with Timeless Highway, a guy named Toby Ruckert, great guitar player. And he was in a band called Tim Purcell and the Mustangs, and they hired me to sub on some dates with them. And the drummer in that band at the time was George Sandler, and he and I met on a gig and just became fast friends. And you know as well as I do that, like, once you hear him play, it's like, oh, okay, wow.
Yeah.
You know, he is a just an unbelievable drummer, versatile, and he can play any live gig, and it feels like you're in a recording studio with him. He is a top caliber, as good as it gets. So so George and I immediately started trying to find whatever ways that we could play together. He would sub in Timeless Highway. He would hire me with some players he was playing with. And then, we did church gigs together. And somewhere along the way, we had this idea that we would maybe try to put together a little keyboard trio project. And it started out, we had several keyboard players, and through their availability, we kind of had to venture out and find others. But Kenny Head played some with the trio, and then Bobby Mobley, I believe, played, who's also an amazing keyboard player I've worked with over the years. And then Dave Schlesman, who is another keyboard player that I've played with over the years that I just have a lot of respect for. He played, and then eventually Brooks Smith started playing, and we branded this band the Deliverymen. And it was basically, we would just kind of show up, and we just kind of never knew what we were going to do. It was everything from the standard fare of any band to Genesis to Steely Dan to Beatles, Paul McCartney, just everything in between. And it was three people that liked playing instruments together, but I think it was a vocal band at the same time. So there was a lot of good 3-part harmony stuff going on. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a fun band.
Yeah, I mean, and I just can't believe some of the stuff y'all played. Like,
Me either.
well, and
Yeah.
I'm sure y'all didn't rehearse much at all. It was
Ever.
just
I don't think we ever had a rehearsal, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
So just showing up and playing Band on the Run, and
Turn it on
Abacab.
again. Yeah. It was like a group text that would say, hey, we should try this song at our next gig, and be like, sure, why not? What's the worst that can happen? If we crash and burn, oh well, so what? Let's go for it. And luckily it never I don't think we ever had to stop and restart a song, so at least there was that. But yeah, that was so much fun. We played a lot of gigs together. We got into this fun circuit through Wesleyan, playing a lot of graduation parties.
Oh yeah.
And we would show up and play those, and they were always a lot of fun, being like middle-aged guys playing for a bunch of high schoolers, but everybody seemed to dig what we were doing, so that was fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so like what about that band do you think gave y'all the ability to go and play those songs? Like,
Number one, I think it was a respect factor. I think we all just love playing music with each other, and when in trust, right? You trust that everyone's going to show up and know their stuff. They're going to prepare. And I think that we just kind of knew that we were going to all spread out our own safety net for each other, right?
mm-hmm.
And, I never wanted to, and I don't want to, I never want to be the weak link in a band or the most unprepared. But, in bands like that, it's like you want to show up, and, you want your bandmates to look at you and go, hey man, that was a nice job, or, stuff like that. And that was that, mutual admiration society thing going on with everybody in the band. And I just think that that collective thing that we all had, it was very evident when we all played together. People could sense that we were trying to make the sum of it the best that it could be. It was very obvious.
Yeah, definitely. And how, I guess with that, with with how there's such a respect, and you want to not impress, but you want to show up and really hold your end of it. How do you balance that with like staying relaxed and letting loose with it and not getting
Yeah.
in your head about it?
Well, I don't know. When I figure it out, I'll let you know. Yeah, and I've talked about that a lot, many times on here. Just that whole mental gymnastic that goes on along with playing music, or I guess anything, but just trying not to get defensive about it. You know, whether if you're like you had a stressful sound check, or you had to learn a bunch of tunes and you didn't get through all of them on the sound check, and you're nervous about that, or maybe someone's being difficult on the bandstand and it's making you play defensively. There's just a lot of different factors that can cause you to get in your own noggin about it, and it's hard sometimes not to let that trickle into what you're doing. But I try to keep the mentality of it that my job first and foremost is to make everyone have fun, whether that's my bandmates or the audience, or anyone that's there, including myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to have fun with it. Otherwise, it's, and you've been there. You go play, and the last thing in the world you want to be doing at that moment is going to play music somewhere, right? But sometimes you just have to kind of let that stuff go and just show up and realize what an opportunity we have that we get to go play music and get paid to do it, because there's a lot of people out there that would give anything to have that opportunity. And I don't want to ever take that lightly, because it is an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, that's it. And and I saw the Deliverymen quite a few times, and it all seemed like y'all were just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, it was like we showed up to hang out and a gig broke out. You're exactly right, because it was always, we would show up and we laughed from the moment we got there until the moment we left, and then some songs happened in between.
Right.
Yeah. And that, I wish that and most bands, thankfully, most band situations I've ever been in have been that way. And I feel very lucky that I've gotten to play with so many different musicians in so many different configurations, that fun was at the forefront of the whole deal, right? Mm-hmm. Because if that happens, chances are everything else is going to be just fine.
Right. Well, and I don't want you to call out any specific names, but how do you react in a situation where that's not the case? And how do you react when there's a lot of tension on stage?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I've had a few times where I've like wanted to put together like the dream team band, and every band that I've gotten to play in its own way is the dream team. But sometimes you put together like who you think is the perfect guitar player, or the perfect drummer, or the perfect keyboard player, and you put them all in the same band with each other. And sometimes it gels and sometimes it just doesn't. I think that there's a certain selfless attitude that has to be there with everyone before the cohesive thing can kind of break through. And I think when people are being difficult, you just kind of have to, if you can, you have to like look past it. I mean, I know I'm like, that sounds oversimplified and the obvious generic answer to it. But like, you have to stay out of your own way about it. And you just have to realize maybe something's just going on with them, or maybe this is their way of dealing with an insecurity about not feeling prepared, or whatever. Look, I've been there. I mean, I know I've been difficult on the bandstand, and most of it has probably been my own crap getting in the way. It's just, we're all human beings. And I think that kind of stuff, it shines through, especially when it's musicians, because, musicians are emotional people, and they're insecure, and they're probably wanting to, fulfill some sort of thing by wanting to play music to begin with, right? So I think that we're all wired that way, and sometimes it's hard to leave that stuff off the bandstand, but you have to learn how to deal with it.
Yeah, I think it's I completely agree, and I feel like the bands that don't have that good vibe off and on the stage, like, they don't survive. they typically don't last.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I was lucky to play with people and a certain few people that immediately come to mind, like Brooks or Scott or Steve Ward. That it's all about the vibe of the personalities before anything else. And let's just all be laid back about it, right? Because I think that transcends anything that you can do on stage. Is just all the players getting along with each other.
Yeah. Well, I guess kind of talking about groups that hated each other. What? So when did you start playing at FBCA?
So I think it would have been around 2000, let's see, 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. And I think I was there 8 years, if memory serves me. I was there a long time. Once again, the amazing Jimmy Mouton made that happen. He was already playing drums there, and they had a couple of band members that moved on to some other opportunities, and Jimmy recommended me for that spot. And Kevin Price was the worship pastor at the time, and Russ Cooper was the guitar player, and several keyboard players, Teresa Herring, and I can't remember who all was playing keyboard at the time. Lou Ann Roberts, who I just absolutely love to death. So yeah, so we started playing together, and eventually, some other band members like Russ moved on to do some other things, and eventually, I got the job as the kind of worship associate that was kind of band leader, I guess, for lack of a better term. And just had an opportunity to play with really great people over that amount of time, and just had an opportunity to bring a lot of good friends in and out to play during that, all my favorite players and all my favorite humans, and when I eventually left, which would have been somewhere around, I don't know, maybe 2014, maybe 2015, that group of musicians with Kevin Albertson and Mark Mundy and Brooks Smith and Kobe Rawson and everyone that was playing there at the time, it was just like we were talking about with the Deliverymen. I mean, it was so easy. We had so much fun with each other, and there was so much fellowship in it all. In that, I mean, we would bring our personal problems and we would bring our stress, and we would all sit and support each other and talk about it. And that was certainly one of those experiences for me that it was great. And you got an opportunity to play some there too, right? I mean, it was some of the first playing you ever did that was like not a school sanctioned event. You did there.
Right. And playing with those guys was the way they encouraged me and really worked with me. It was very validating at that point. Like, hey, what I'm doing is actually worth a shit.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And I can't imagine, doing that full time, how that, I'm sure you get that feeling. It's like, hey, I'm clearly doing something right here by knowing these people.
Yeah, that's really it. I mean, that's kind of the in a nutshell, that's the genesis behind this entire podcast thing that we're sitting here doing right now, was just an opportunity to celebrate the people that I've been so lucky to play music with and just call my friends for so long. That because of music, I've been able to meet all my best friends in the whole world. It's pretty amazing. I mean, I have a lot of friends that the music thing is not the common denominator, but most of my friends I play music with. Most of the people that I stay in touch with that are not family are people that I know through playing music. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. But I think those people, if you decided I'm never touching an instrument again, they're still going to be your friends,
Well, and that happened, right? I mean,
yeah.
There was a period of time. This would have been, I guess it had to have been like 2018, around 2019. I was just fried. I was just burnt out. I mean, I was working full time at the school and then playing many times every week. And from around the time you were born until the time I decided to kind of hang it up, I think I had played over 4,000 gigs while working full time. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I felt like I was a passenger in my own life, and I was missing your stuff. I was missing being at home. It was like I was either at home writing charts or learning tunes or getting my clothes ready to go play a gig, or I was at home sleeping on the couch because I was exhausted from the gig that I just played. And I just felt like I was missing out on my life. And, between you and your sister and Lisa, I just didn't want to do that anymore. But I was very worried because I didn't want to let anyone down. I didn't want to let my buddies down and say, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore. But everyone was so completely supportive, to go back to what you were saying, like the friendship was the anchor around all of that other music stuff. The music stuff was important, but those relationships were the most important,
Yeah. Well, and that all directly affected the music. It made it really, really tight. I think y'all doing that and being so laid back on stage and having such fun, just yeah.
Yeah, that's it. There's no need and there's no place for being uptight or feeling like you need to prove anything to anyone when you're on stage. There's nothing that's solved by acting that way,
Right. Well, and unfortunately, it's kind of ruined my perception of live bands because I feel like y'all have set the standard so high that if I go, see a band at a bar, it's just terrible.
I understand. And I feel I consider myself really lucky that I've gotten to play with all those people because, yeah, I get it. It's like you can tell watching a band on stage that they are fine. They would be fine whether they were on stage with each other or at home. They don't care. Mm-hmm. They don't, the relationship with each other is like secondary to everything else. Yeah, I'm lucky. I feel very lucky that I've had fewer gigs like that than I've had gigs like that. So it's very good.
I don't know if I can say the same, but
maybe eventually.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. So I remember it, if my memory serves me correctly, the first time you met Mark and Jody, or at least the audition for Across the Wide, I was there.
You were there. That's exactly right. Yeah, you were. We went to Sawney Mountain Music, and they were just knocked out because you were this, young kid wearing a Pat Metheny t-shirt, and they were just like so knocked out. And then they told me that they had gone to see Pat Metheny in concert, and I'm like, okay, yeah, these guys are going to be okay. It's funny that there are two parts of my life, both as a person and as a musician. And I feel like the first part of it was my life before I met Mark and Jody. And then the second part of my life was since I've met them. And it's truly remarkable to me that we spent so many years living so close to each other and knowing so many of the same musicians that it took many years before we either met each other or started playing together.
Yeah.
And all of these really funny circumstances that led to it, starting with, our Uncle Darren that worked at a landscape supply store with Mark Mundy. And, he's like telling him, oh, my nephew plays and sings. And I've heard that 1,000 times from people and I'm like, yeah, okay. And then I was playing in a band with Kevin Albertson, with some players, and Mark was out that night and came to hear us play, and he got up and sat in with us, and I'm like, oh wow, look, right? He played, and I'm like, oh wow, what's this all about, right? And a week or two later, Lisa and I were out hanging out one Sunday afternoon, and we went by Good Old Days. And as we were walking in the door, Mark was walking out. They had just finished playing, and I remember telling her, I just met that guy. He came into one of the gigs, and I'd really like to play some music with them. I just think that I get this. I in that short, like playing like two Merle Haggard songs together on another band's gig. I got the sense that we kind of spoke the same language. And they reached out to me because their bass player was moving and they were looking for someone. And that Saturday afternoon, you and I went up to the music store and we just sat around and played. And that was it. I mean, I knew within 45 seconds of the first song that I was going to have, if I needed to like break the kneecaps of every other bass player that wanted to be in that band, I was going to, that's exactly what I was going to do. Luckily, and I didn't know this until later, they had other auditions lined up for that day. And Jody said, can we take a quick break? And he went outside and called and said, we found our person. You don't need to worry about coming in. And I'm not, that is certainly not a pat on the back for anything with me. It was more of the fact that let's see if I can explain this. The three of us had this interesting kind of upbringing around that kind of music, but somewhere along the way, we all started listening to a lot of other music. Mm-hmm. And just kind of through osmosis and bringing it in, so many different influences, but at the core of it is that kind of music that Across the Wide plays, right?
Right.
And they just immediately like welcomed me in. That they did. All of the people that would come to hear them play just immediately welcomed me in, and it was just like it did feel instant. It just clicked. And I would tell people like you don't have to like country music. Just come hear this band. I promise you'll like them. You don't even have to like country music because it's just so honest and it's high energy and it's just good. They're just great,
Yeah. Yeah, every one of them is just such a good musician. Like, yeah. And it's kind of that simple. But I love what you said. It's so, I feel like it's so honest to your musical upbringing, the way y'all play that music.
Yeah, that's it. It's, I feel like for some reason, country music gets a bad rap about the simplicity of it and that it's easy to play. And I think that's a deceptive. I don't think that if you're going to play it correctly, I think it's way more difficult in the simplicity and the space required. And, you never want it to feel like it's a caricature of country music, which I do feel like sometimes that happens with people where it's almost like a wink that we're playing a country song when it's not, it doesn't feel like you're being honest and respecting and celebrating the heritage of the music,
Yeah. And as a person who has played in bands where that's the case, where it's more about the party and the mm-hmm. It sucks.
Yeah.
it really sucks. And
yeah,
but I feel like when we would play Merle Haggard stuff and kind of some older stuff, people would appreciate it a lot more. Mm-hmm. It's just really weird.
Yeah, I always wonder about that, about what makes, and this could be asked about any form of entertainment or art or whatever label you want to call it, but what makes something timeless? What makes Merle Haggard timeless, or what makes Led Zeppelin 2 timeless, or what makes Talking Heads timeless? And I think that it is that honesty. And I think it's the authenticity that it is you're honoring and serving what you're doing and what you're trying to contribute to make what you're doing the best that it can be, and it's never self-serving. Like if you hear Merle Haggard sing a song, there's never a self-serving element to it at all.
No.
Now, if you hear other artists sing or play, that's not the case, right?
And that music will not stand the test of time.
That's it. It will not stand the test of time. That's exactly right. It may not make it past the end of this calendar year, right?
Yeah, it's like single serve music.
That's it. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, obviously the core, getting to play with Mark and Jody, who I just, I can't say enough for how much I love and respect them as human beings and as musicians. And then all of the people that I've been lucky enough to play with them, like Tim Hamilton and Tommy Dodd played some, and Kenny Head, and all the great drummers that have played, and Kevin Albertson, Jimmy Mouton, George Sandler, Mark Strickland, who I've been fortunate enough to play a lot with that band over the past few years. And Mark is he's a great drummer, and just I feel such a kinship to his playing, and really just kind of feel like I can just kind of sit into whatever it is that he's playing. It's like you never have to worry about where that kick drum note is. You know where it is, and yeah, it's just. But to go back to compare it to the Deliverymen, it's like there's just great playing, and and let me throw Wendell Cox's name in there too, right? Because Wendell played a lot, especially when he was not on the road with Travis, and I just couldn't. I used to get to stand next to him and just listen to him play rhythm guitar all night, and it was like that's worth the price of admission. Just listening to the stuff he would play while someone was singing or taking a solo. But all of that to say, like the Deliverymen, I think first and foremost, it's a vocal band.
Yeah.
We like to sing. Jody and I would like to sing those duets, those old like Buck Owens, Don Rich duets with each other. But we would also like to sing a lot of like 3-part harmony stuff. And Mark is probably as easy to sing harmony with as anyone I've ever been lucky to work with. Those guys are just they're all right. I think they're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think they'll make it.
They'll make it.
Yeah, I think that speaks to a lot of the fact that it's such a vocal band. I think it shows how much all of y'all's influences like kind of come through in that music. I mean, just and this is something I wanted to talk about is the Nowhere Men.
Right.
Right. And the fact that y'all were playing across the wide gigs and then going and playing Beatles gigs.
Right.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really funny, and that whole thing, the Nowhere Men, which was like a Beatles cover band, certainly not a tribute band, because if there's one thing the world does not need is more tribute bands.
Not wearing a wig.
We had played this event for Fine Arts Week at Wesleyan, and the chorus at Wesleyan was doing a celebration of the Beatles, and the teacher there at the time asked me to put together something and do some Beatles songs. And it was like, well, here's all my buddies. Let's quickly do this. And it was, Mark on guitar and Brooks on keyboards, George on drums, and I sang. And then Steve Ward was up in the booth running sound. So then we were like, oh, wow, this was fun. This was so easy. Let's find a way to make this way more difficult. So let's try to learn a lot of Beatles songs and put together a band. And it was a 5-piece band, but in order to play a lot of those double rhythm guitar parts or accomplish some of the later catalog material, it required more than 4 people can do at any given point. And so we put that band together, and I have to say it was probably one of the bigger learning experiences for me. It was stressful, and if I'm being very honest with you, I can't say that I liked it all the time. And I think it was because I felt I put an enormous amount of pressure on myself to do those songs the right way and not to let down the other guys that I was on stage with. Yeah. And I got more than any other band that I've ever played in. I had an enormous amount of anxiety leading up to those gigs because it just I used to tell you all the time, it's like the SAT of music, whereas I think a lot of people discount Beatles songs like they discount country music, and that there's like, oh, there's nothing to that. There's nothing going on there. But once you get under the hood, there's a whole lot of stuff going on, from the instrumental part to trying to play all those freaking Paul McCartney bass lines.
I mean, it's just all over the place.
Yeah, it was all over the place. And yeah, it was, I told someone one time, if you ever want to stop liking a band, you should play their songs all the time. Well, because it got to the point where I didn't even want to listen to Beatles stuff for a while, because I almost felt a little like disgruntled toward it. Like, oh yeah, here we go again. I'm having to learn a bunch of songs, I shouldn't be complaining about any of this, but if I'm being honest, that is the way that I felt about it at the time.
Yeah, I get it. And they're incredibly difficult, but that all of those guys are going to show up and nail it.
Oh, absolutely. There's a book. Actually, as we're sitting here, I see it over here. The Beatles complete scores. Someone, I guess, a collection of transcribers took all of the Beatles songs that were recorded and basically notated every part of what was on the record. And, to talk about, how amazing George Sandler is, let's talk for a moment about how amazing George was. He asked me to send him the scores to all those songs that we were doing, and I had PDFs of it. And he was playing note for note Ringo parts on all those songs that he had learned from those scores. And I just remember, thinking, well, way to raise the bar, dude. Thanks. Thanks a lot. But that's the way he is, and that's the way they all were. I mean, Steve Ward was the same way, Mark was, Brooks was, and it was just, I've always enjoyed those opportunities to watch my best pals showing the world just how amazing they are, and I feel like that's what happened every time that band played. What was fun is that every now and then on one of those gigs we would play like a non-Beatles song, and it was like the easiest thing in the world to do after that. It's just like, oh yeah, that's okay. Let's play Pretzel Logic. That's easy compared to having to play, and sing Band on the Run or sing Maybe I'm Amazed, or just singing those songs that when you're over 40 years old and you're trying to sing those vocal parts that those guys did when they were 20, it's like, I'm not built for that anymore,
Well, you certainly were. I mean, it was as the most accurate band, like a Beatles cover band I've ever heard on and off the internet.
Yeah, it was. I do think that we honored and did those songs justice. And I sometimes will go back and just listen to some recordings that we did of some live shows, and it was an enormous amount of fun. It was an enormous amount of fun, and I do wish that I wish I could go back and kind of relive some of those moments and just have a little more fun with it, maybe than I did at the time, where I absolutely was in my head about some of those things. That band being probably at the top of that list.
Yeah, I completely get it. I mean, they play at such a high standard that it's really hard not to.
Yeah.
Well, and I just feel like all of your bands have kind of been that way, especially after college. The standard of music has always been so high.
Well, and I agree, and I think it's that I've just been so lucky to play with players that just play it and sing at a high level, and they're just so, golly, I've just been so lucky to get to do that. And yeah, it's one of those things that we all dream of getting to do, and when you get to do it, it's pretty amazing to get to, because we've all played those gigs that were not that way, where every song feels like its own set. It's like you're like, I shouldn't be looking at my watch after the first song, but it just, I suppose some of the less than ideal ones are there just to make the good ones seem even better, make you appreciate them more.
I had a gig at this terrible bar in Baton Rouge, and that was that way, where the lead singer and I just didn't really mesh very well. Me and the bass player did, but it was just kind of an uncomfortable band. Like, the vibe was really weird. We didn't play for very, very long, but it felt like it took all night. And we got paid $25.
Oh man.
So that was
the money was already spent before you even played a note.
Yeah. I mean, we had about 4 or 5 rehearsals for it, just to go up and not playing any of it well. So
yeah, I have I would say a love-hate relationship, probably a little more on the hate side than the love side for rehearsal bands. I get the necessity of it, and some of these bands that we've been talking about, we would have rehearsals, but not many. It wouldn't be like 4 rehearsals for one gig or anything like that. It's like the goal for me at least, if I was putting together a band, is to put together good enough players that have a good enough work ethic and are easy enough to work with, that you're not going to have to worry about a rehearsal, and just say, here. I remember at FBCA one time they were like wanting to add in a midweek rehearsal, and at one point we did have a midweek, but then one point we didn't. And they were wanting to add one. And I remember saying, I'll make a deal with you. Let's just have a Sunday morning call. And if you feel like we're not accomplishing what we need to, we'll go back and have a midweek. We'll do a midweek rehearsal. Totally fine. And I remember telling the musicians, all right, we have to show up prepared, and everyone did. And it was like, oh yeah, we don't need to do this. It's like life is too busy as it is, and then if you make a group of people show up when maybe it's not necessary, it's insulting to them, and it's taking money out of their pocket when they could have been playing somewhere else, or they could have just been home with their family. It's like, or don't have a rehearsal. Maybe you'll understand this one a little bit better. Don't have a rehearsal, quote unquote, for the band, but when it's really for the singer or the right?
Oh man, that is the truth.
Don't make the musicians come to the rehearsal so you can feel more confident about your part.
Oh, that 100%. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is just projecting insecurity, honestly. And it's saying, oh, I don't think y'all can show up and do it. It's completely projecting that they don't think that they can show up and do it.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And it's not always that way. I mean, I look at that same band. We had a period of time at the church where we were without a worship pastor. So they were bringing in these worship leaders from Nashville, like every week. There would be like 2 or 3 of them. And we wouldn't have a midweek rehearsal because they would roll in Saturday night or first thing Sunday morning, and they would pass out number charts, and we would just run it down and play that day. And it's like these people are professionals. They get it. And they don't feel the need to make everyone show up for an additional rehearsal if it's not necessary. Let's just all trust each other, and let's all hold each other and ourselves to the same level of accountability. And let's all know that we're going to show up and get the job done, right? That's the point of it all.
Yeah, that's it. I'm kind of curious about rehearsals and kind of how you approached them, because I know at one point you were the band leader and you were kind of facilitating all of that. What mentality did you have to have going into that to keep the vibe relaxed and positive while still, being successful and achieving a high level of music?
I think that number one, if you're the person running the rehearsal, you have to be the most prepared person on stage. That's first and foremost. But more than anything, I believe you have to trust your musicians, and you cannot ever make them feel like you're micromanaging what they're doing, or you're going to start making them play defensively. So one of the things that I would like to do, unless there was a complete train wreck, I would, and you've probably worked with worship leaders that they'll run the first verse and chorus of the first song 10 times and spend 45 minutes on that. And then you have 30 minutes to run the entire rest of the set.
Yep.
And it's like, that's not efficient time management for anyone. So I would either like to run each song all the way down and then tweak things, or run the entire set, tweak a few things at the end. So making some notes as we went through the set, take 5 minutes, make some comments on it, and then play the entire set again. And you basically played your entire thing in 40 minutes instead of wasting 90 minutes and maybe not actually getting anything accomplished. Because as well as I do, whether it's a piece of music, you're an etude or an excerpt or a song with a band or whatever, the challenge of it is doing the entire thing from the beginning to the end. It's not playing a perfect thing on, we have to make sure this transition is right. It's not that thing. It's like, no, let's get from point A to point B before, we sit here and beat this dead horse, So to eloquently describe the photo that Kobe Toby, Ross, and Drew on stage one day when we were beating a dead horse in rehearsal. Yeah.
It's fantastic. How would you, because I'm sure there were points where you had to say, just know that I need you to do something different there. How do you approach that and not, still say that with the respect of the musician in mind?
Yeah, right. Because you don't ever want to make someone feel like their idea or what they're contributing isn't good, but it may not be the best thing for that song at that moment. And it's more of a, hey, can you try this for me and let's just see how it fits. And instead of, I don't like what you're doing, let's change that, right? Because look, I've been there, and I know you've been there. You've dealt with people that tell you as we're looking at each other smiling, as you've dealt with people that try to tell you to do some tom work on this song that have no business, number one, telling you that, or two, they don't know how to do it. Because look, every relationship lives or dies by communication, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that you communicate with people, especially musicians, it's crucial. Right. In that how you say it may be more important than what you actually say, Mm-hmm. So, I've at least always tried for it to be from a place of, hey, let's try this and see if this works. Let's try a few things and see if it works. That's always I've tried to be that way during rehearsals.
Yeah, and it's hard, especially when there's a literal countdown timer, and it's like, and this is something I have always wanted to know from you, because I know this doesn't just apply to rehearsals where you're in the band, but also when you're teaching and stuff, is how do you decide what to bring up? Because
that's a great question.
Because you can't just sit and micromanage all of it. You shouldn't. And there's just not enough time to bring everything up.
Yeah. So my it typically starts with the drums, right? What is keeping is the groove the thing that's keeping the song from being what it can be, right? So it's rhythm section, and then it's picking your battles, right? What small change is going to have the biggest impact on the song, right? Where it's like, let's just change the bass drum, bass guitar pattern just this much and see if it just shifts the way that everyone is feeling this thing, right? Especially, if it's a rehearsal and right, because typically with like playing in churches and things like that, or maybe playing like wedding receptions and stuff like that, it's like you're diffusing a bomb, because you have a countdown clock, right? You're on the clock and it has to be finished before. It's not like showing up at a rehearsal at someone's house. You have all the time in the world. So you have to have if you're like, I'm thinking about rehearsing the band, but also at the same time rehearsing the singers. It's like, that's a whole other set of picking your battles. And, if you remember back at when we were at Wesleyan, it was like, I would try to do as much as I could with the band and then do as much as I could with the vocalist, and not try to do too much at the same time, because to me, it just gets really muddy really quickly.
Yeah. Well, and typically if you make one or two positive changes, it's going to clean up most of it.
Yeah. One of the things that I started doing at Wesleyan was that I would always have the singers say the lyrics to the song with no pitch, but to say them in rhythm. So it would be like count off a hi-hat, and they would say the rhythm of the song while just doing it in time and not worrying about the notes. Because typically, if you clean up the rhythm of the vocal part, when multiple people are singing together, if you clean up the rhythm, it's going to fix probably as many problems as the notes themselves. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you have to fix a vocalist rhythm, which is going to be really tough. So...
Yeah, right, because you also have to teach them the rhythm, teach them how to. Yeah, bless their hearts.
But man, that band, especially my last 2 years, was just unbelievable.
Really was unbelievable. I can't I think about it from occasionally of just how the bar just continued to raise with you guys. And even like, the band rehearsals were just so easy. The vocal rehearsals were so easy. And then we would just put it together and it would be like, okay, we're done. It was, we would do like a band only rehearsal. Then we would do a vocal only rehearsal. And I would sit at the piano and they would just stand around me and we would just work out. And I mean, these are like high school students or even middle school students sometimes singing these three-part harmony parts together, and then we would just put it all together for the final rehearsal. And typically it was just a run through. Right. I mean, it wasn't even that much of a rehearsal. And I think just like we've been talking about this whole time, where your collective product is going to be better when people don't want to let each other down, and they don't want to be the person that causes the product not to be the best it can be,
Yeah, and that was definitely the case, but it wasn't like, it wasn't like North Korea where, you're going to get publicly humiliated for it. But it was this, I don't know if it was a mutual respect we all had for each other. I mean, I don't exactly know, but it felt so easy, honestly.
Well, and we took, I was playing at Mount Pisgah at the time, and we took the group of chapel band students, you and Zach and Annie and Laura. I can't remember if there was anyone else. Maybe that was it.
Was Lizzie there?
Lizzie was I think Lizzie did one of them. Yeah. And it was, I remember people that I played with at the church were like, I cannot believe that high schoolers are playing and singing this well. It's unbelievable how good they sound. I'm like, yeah, I know. I can't believe that I get to work with them every week and just sit and listen to what they're doing. It was pretty mind blowing,
Well, you had a lot to do with it. But I think one of the big reasons why you have been successful in bands doing that and being successful with teaching bands to do that is you have an appreciation for the fundamentals of music, and not just playing your instrument, but the fundamentals of playing with other people. And like, hey, we still have to lock the bass player in with the drummer, and we still have to be lining up our rhythms for these vocal parts. And
I was just talking to someone on the phone about that yesterday, about the fact that no matter how good you get woodshedding at your house or in your practice room or wherever, in your recording studio, wherever, there is no substitute for playing music with other people. To me, it's paramount that you have to, and there's the nuts and bolts of the music part of it, the music theory and the technique and all of that. But then that whole other like emotional, psychological thing that goes along with it too, right? Because that's the thing that is really so interesting about artistic expression, whatever you want to call it, music or whatever, is that fundamentally there's this black and white thing about it of music theory and, again, the technical approach to it. But then there's this entire emotional part of it that you're attaching to it, and finding that give and take between the two is, I feel like it's a lifelong path that we're all on, right? Is like, how do I stay true to the way I'm playing and how I'm playing the instrument while being expressive and putting emotion and honesty behind what I'm playing and singing? I mean, it's hard. Hell, it's hard to even try to explain it right now.
I get it, but and I think there's also this weird push and pull that has to happen with the musicians you're playing with, and that's part of it too. Is like understanding that like you have to let. I play a game where you deal with a lot of teammates, and the biggest advice for it is let your teammates do what they can do. And I think that applies a lot. Is, just trust that they're going to show up and not only fulfill their part of the bargain, but they're going to bring something else to it, and respect that.
No, that's a really great point. And I would say that, my process works really well for me, but my process may not work well for you, or it may not work well for another musician that I'm playing with. And I have to trust my process, but I have to trust theirs. right?
Mhm.
And that they're going to do their thing, and it's going to be okay, because if we're all trying to serve the same goal, the same common goal here, yeah, it's going to be fine. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I want to talk to you about Shaky Jane, and because
Yeah.
it's tough for me, because that between that and Across the Y, those are my two favorite bands you've been in.
Yeah.
Both for kind of different reasons.
Why? Let me ask you, why would what did you love about those two bands?
So I really like just the music y'all played in Shaky Jane was
It's all stuff we like to listen to,
yeah,
right?
I mean
Yeah.
it I could tell that it was not a passion project, but it in a way it was, where I could tell that was really what you wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell that you enjoyed hearing what you were producing.
Yeah.
But with Across the Wide, I mean, it's such a tight band.
Yeah,
Like
I
it
know.
when and the whole band as a whole was always tight, but when it was just you, Mark, and Jody, I mean, it just
Yeah.
unfreaking believable.
Yeah, the trio. Yeah, exactly. It's funny you bring all this up. I'm sitting here thinking about this, and I think you and I talked about this way early on in this conversation. The first part of it, because those two bands are probably the nearest and dearest to my heart too. And what I'm realizing is that Across the Wide, in some funny way, is honoring the music that my dad gave me growing up. And Shaky Jane, that music is the music my mom gave me, and I take both of them seriously, to take both of those projects very seriously. And maybe in some subconscious way, that might be what it is, because I owe so much of my musical identity to that music that they approached, they like let me hear when I was growing up, and so much of that Shaky Jane music is what my mom liked to listen to, still likes to listen to. And yeah, they are probably passion projects for different reasons. Shaky Jane at its core is, Steve Ward and myself, and then we had so many different configurations, from a 3-piece with drums, or 3-piece with the amazing David Ellis, multi-instrumentalist, or Kenny Head, or Wes, or Brooks, or Mark Mundy, or I mean, the options were endless of what we would do. And what was so fun about it is that every configuration brought this whole cool, different element to it. But at the core of it, it was just us doing those fantastic songs, just trying to honor the great material that of the music that we just, it's just in our hearts.
Yeah. And a thing I just love thinking about is, if you take both of those bands and go through everyone's influences and the music they all listen to, it's everything.
Yeah, it is everything.
And it's almost, it kind of feels like y'all are truly experts at music, and
Well,
it's not just you're really good at your thing. Like, there's such a full understanding of what music is about, right? Instead of just being able to play the same 20 songs that person wrote.
yeah. I wish that I had recordings. I wish I had recordings of every gig that we had played together over the years. But if I'm being honest, more than that, I wish I could have recordings of the conversations that Steve Ward and I have had over the years about this very thing that you and I are talking about, where it's like the mental game of playing all of this music and trying to honor and support each other and the material with each other. And yeah, it's I wouldn't say experts, but I would say that it's a bunch of players that really just really, really enjoy playing. And then, if I'm going to talk about Shaky Jane, I have to talk about places like Montana's. That was just the most, if every live music venue across the land could be like Montana's, music would have a bigger place, public performance would have a bigger place now than it does, because those are such supportive, amazing people that show up to have a good time. But more than anything, they want to listen and feel inspired by people playing and singing. I mean, you're playing in a bar and you get a standing ovation at the end of a song. It's like, what? That doesn't happen, right?
No.
You know?
Well, I think people want that. I think,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, I mean, y'all had like fans. You know, you had people that would follow y'all around Atlanta just wanting to hear you play.
Yeah. You know, I learned so much in that period of getting to play with Steve Ward. He's just a master of what he does and how he does it. You know, just the whole deal. I mean, everything that he does was just like a masterclass in being a professional musician. I mean, you know, he should probably have his own podcast talking about the things that it takes to just go to survive and thrive as a professional musician, because that's what he's done like his whole life, you know, and he continues to stay busy as a player and a singer because he's great, and people just, they buy what he's selling, you know, they just do. And I know why, because it's so good.
Yeah.
You know, and golly, I mean, I'm so thankful that I got to that I've been able to you know, go on that magic carpet ride with him for a while. You know, it's pretty amazing.
Well, and talk about another person that's so easy to work with. I mean,
Oh my gosh, so easy. You know, and if we're talking about the Shaky Jane thing, we should probably talk about that gig that we did with the Bacon Brothers that time. Was that the summer before your senior year of high school? Yeah, because it would have been like 2019, right? We got hired through RCS Productions to open a show for the Bacon Brothers down in Peachtree City, Georgia. And I had this dream of getting to play a show like that with you. And Steve and David were like, let's do it. Let's go do it, you know? So we got together a few times and went and played that show. And I thought that we sounded as good as it could have possibly sounded. It was unbelievable. And you killed it. You sounded so good, you know? I mean, I think you were a little terrified. You were a little nervous about it, you know, but got to hang out with Kevin Bacon. Yeah, that was pretty funny. But you know, that one will be on a short list of some of my favorite gigs that I've ever played, was doing that one with you. That was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that I will tell my grandchildren about that. You know, but I just feel like every time me and you would play, it was so tight.
It really was. Yeah. And when you really started playing drum set, I remember we would start to play with each other and it was like, whoa. It's like when you hear family members sing with each other, you can hear that blood family thing going on. I felt like it was the same thing with us playing together. It was like our heartbeat was the same, you know.
Yeah.
It just happened. Yeah. It was, and whether you realize it or not, I think it improved and changed my approach to playing with a drummer when I got to play with you, because it had this whole different element than it had maybe had with just people that I'd played with over the years that weren't my family. You know, it was this completely different thing with you that was just so much fun.
Yeah. Well, talking about another standard you've ruined. I can't play with another bass player.
Oh, wow.
It's like, geez.
Oh, I appreciate that. I keep telling myself that I'm going to spend more time and try to get better on bass guitar. I'm just lazy. I think that's the problem. I'm just lazy. You know, there's so many shows to watch and there's so much baseball and so much to do. But you know, I have never ever considered myself a bass player. But getting to play with a good drummer like you, it's like, oh yeah, this is why I chose to do this, is to get to play with people that can groove like you can. You know?
Well, I appreciate it. But it was just so very easy to play. And it is like, when I think of a bass player and how a bass player should sound and play and fit in to a band, like, I genuinely do think of you, because it's like, you have become the standard. And when you are when you play with a group, you just instantly raise it up. And I don't know if that's just, I don't think that's a tone thing. I don't think that's you choosing to play this lick versus this lick. It's understanding your place in all of it and being able to just jump in and kind of selflessly adapt to the situation.
I think being a bass player is like being the IT department of the band, and that you don't exist until it's not working.
Oh man.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I honestly don't even want to be. Of course, you want to get a good side look from the drummer, like, yeah, man, that's making what I'm doing easier or better. Feels good. But ultimately, I just want to stay out of the way and let the lead people shine. That's really I feel like the goal with bass, at least in the type of music that I enjoy playing the most. It feels like such a support instrument and not so much of a out front type of approach or sound.
Yeah, absolutely. So I and we've talked about this a lot, but I kind of want to see where you are these days, just in regards to what you're listening to.
Let's see. I don't listen, and I know you know this, but I should say for the record that I tend to listen to the same like 6 or 7 albums over and over again, probably to like a borderline unhealthy or strange, like psychopath type level, where I have a playlist. It's basically it's like 50% Steve Reich and 50% Pat Metheny. And it basically alternates between albums. So it's like music for 18 musicians, still live talking, the desert music. And then it just starts going through the Metheny catalog from like the Bright Side's Life to the Pat Metheny Group White Album, like chronologically, and then different Steve Reich things interspersed in there. I listen to that stuff a lot. But I still have such a love for like, I know you and I really like JD McPherson. I listen to him a lot. I just love what he does. And I still go back and listen to a lot of old Steely Dan albums. I just love the Royal Scam. I could listen to that album every day of my life and be okay with it. I listen to, I think back to a lot of my singing heroes. I just love the James Taylors and the Alison Krauss and the Merle Haggards and Gene Watson and Ronnie Millsap and all of these great people that just they sing every song like it's the last one that they're ever going to get to sing. So yeah, I was playing so much, and I've heard a lot of other musicians say this, that I played so much music there for a while that the last thing in the world I wanted to do was listen to music in my own time. So it was a lot of podcasts and audiobooks and sports radio and stuff like that. But I'm at a place now where I'm, I really enjoy listening to music. And I don't listen to it as much from an analytical standpoint, and more just listen to it as a fan of music.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to like get into that habit of saying, oh, what's the chord progression here? Or what kind of snare drum do you think they used on this? Or how did they mic the bass amp on this or the guitar amp? It's like, just listen to the freaking song. It's okay. Just give me the damn number.
But I obviously those have trickled down to me.
Yeah.
But I feel like Pat Metheny and Steve Reich are kind of at the top for you.
Mm-hmm. They are.
And how do you think those two have kind of shaped your other music? So how has Steve Reich, besides just repeating the same things over and over,
it prepared me for playing church music. No.
But yeah, like what I guess what from that music has informed your playing?
There is such a level of maybe if I can invent a term here, locked inness, that is required to play that music, and understanding the push and pull of and I think that's I think the push and pull and playing to the song are both very overused terms. But I do think listening has to be first. Whether you're consuming music or creating music, listening has to be first. And, hearing and listening are two very different things, right? Listening is an active exercise where you're not just taking in what people are doing, but you are hearing it and adapting to it and responding to it, right? And I think when I listen to that music and I listen to the people perform that music, it requires so much of an internal commitment to playing it while also keeping your ears completely wide open to make sure you are serving what everyone else is doing,
Yeah. Very unlike that vibraphone player we saw
in Knoxville all those years ago, that I would still smack him if I could find him. Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, but it's really interesting how completely different that is from playing like Shaky Jane stuff or playing a Merle Haggard song versus drumming.
Yeah, or Bela Bartok, right? Or John Cage or any of that. Right. It's so different. But at the same time, it's also very similar in what is required, mostly between your ears to make it happen, right?
Yeah. So I guess where do you see that going now? So where, like with classical and stuff like that, where do you think we're heading? Do you think we're going to end up having some sort of like reset?
So great question. And I do feel like it's going to require a little bit of that. I think that the concert hall and the concert venue are starting to overlap more now than they're feeling separate. And I think a lot of it is the economics. And I think that symphony orchestras are struggling so much to put butts in seats for these shows that someone may not want to pay $75 to come and watch someone play a Mozart symphony, but they will pay $75 to come and watch an orchestra play along with a Star Wars movie, or they'll watch them play a symphonic version of Pink Floyd or something like that. And I don't want to sound like a jerk when I say this, but I'm probably going to. That's just not my thing. I mean, I would like to go see an orchestra play a movie, but I'm just not a huge. I want to hear the music that was written 100 years ago. I want to hear. I like to get dressed up and go sit and be silent in a concert hall and listen to these people play at the top of their game music that has stood the test of time, right? So my hope is that there's going to be a resurgence of people wanting to listen to that kind of music. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't really know. I don't know. I think, there's no way of me saying this without sounding like an old fart. So, but what's the difference? I've been doing it this whole thing anyway, right? I think that the thing that's so wonderful about classical music or even jazz music is that it requires patience and it requires you to stop for a few minutes and not focus on anything else. And I just feel like the world has shifted in a way now that I just don't know if the typical attention span lends itself well to that type of art like it used to, where everything is based on a short clip or, we're going to edit a video. So it's basically every bit of dead space is cut out of it. It's like everything is cut as fast as it can be. And a Mahler symphony takes time. It takes 90 minutes to listen to it. And it's going to require you not to look down at your phone for a little while or just to be patient with it, So I don't know if it's going to be the art is going to have to bend to the listener or if the listener is going to have to bend to the art. And I don't know which group is going to be required to compromise first.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do feel like a lot of, bluegrass is kind of coming back with like Billy Strings and
Nickel Creek and absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of older country is kind of coming back, that thing. So I guess I have hope,
Yeah.
But it sucks because I want to be able to go and hear Firebird,
yes.
And
that's it.
You can't put a 4-piece band together and go do that.
No, you can put the Bad Plus together and they can do the Rite of Spring, but that's about it. That's as close as you're ever going to get to it. Yeah. Let me say too, that made me think of Dave King, which then made me think of, I think the most excited I've been about any musician in a very, very long time that I cannot stop listening to is Julian Lage, guitar player. I just cannot believe what the level of guitar playing that he is performing at and composing. And it is just, I believe his playing he will be mentioned with those big names like Wes Montgomery and Joe Pass and Pat Metheny and all of those players. I think he's going to be on that list someday for what he has managed to accomplish in the world of instrumental music.
Yeah. What do you think he kind of brings to the table?
Well, he plays his ass off, first of all. He plays really well. He writes great music. But again, just go watch a video of him playing live with other people, and it's all from a place of joy. He is happy, and he is trying to bring everything he can to make it be the best thing he can. That's really it, So yeah, I just can't get enough of his playing. I really can't.
Man, that is fantastic. Well, this has been really, really good. Yeah,
this has been good. I think we could just keep releasing these and see how long it takes for us to completely isolate ourselves from everyone else. Like, okay, guys, we get it. You guys like to talk a lot to each other.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's all right. No, this has been really good. And the funny thing for me is that I feel like we've just like pressed record on the conversations that you and I already have with each other, which is what's so funny about all of this. I mean, this is basically our phone conversations that we have with each other basically every time we talk. But, part of all of this was to just be able to tell my story to you and your sister, and that when I'm gone, maybe you guys can listen back and say, this is what Dad was doing all those times when he wasn't at home, when he was missing us. This is what he was doing, and all of the great people that he got to meet, that we got to meet in his, that were so important in his life, because that's really, I've gotten to play great music and do all that, but really at the end of the day, the people that I've gotten to meet, that's the most important part of all this,
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, and I was so excited to do this because I just wanted to know all of this. But I felt like I got to see a lot of this, but not know, I guess, what was going through your head in all of it. So this is very important to me. Yeah, I mean, this is great.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you asking such great questions and keeping the conversation going and not letting me ramble on as much as probably I could have,
Well, we'll have to do more and get you rambling a little bit more.
That's it. Well, it won't take much. So, all right, buddy. Well, thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Bandwich Tapes. I'm your host, Brad Williams. The show's theme is called Playcation and was written by Mark Mundy. Drop me a line at the email address, thebandwichtapes@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe to receive new episodes of the podcast. And while you're at it, please tell someone else about the show. Thanks for listening.